bring back some memories to a few of you. Not some of those of us were here then, many of us were not. But that was 10 years ago this month, and happened right here. And those 10 years have been an exciting journey for our church. It's been a journey that began 5, 6, 7 years, well, in the mind of God, I'm sure many years before that, and has continued and will continue, we hope, into the future. It's a journey that we have taken together. And as I was thinking about journeys, this Lenten season is kind of a journey. You know, it's a 6-week period prior to Easter. And we're journeying toward a destination, and that destination is Christ's death for us on the cross and His resurrection from the tomb. And usually during Lent, we focus on themes of our own spiritual lives, of reflecting, of repenting, of making ourselves ready for the coming of Christ and for His death for us. And several weeks ago, I preached on that theme of repentance, and that was more the personal theme of repentance, what we as individuals need to do to prepare ourselves, to reflect on maybe our sin, our need, our areas where we lack God's grace working in our lives, where we need to change direction, to turn around, to walk closer with our Lord. But then today I want to talk more about what we as a church, as a corporate group of Christians gathered here, can do, maybe should do, as we examine not just our individual lives, but our life together as Mountain View Fellowship. Those of you who were here 10 years ago and maybe were in that video recall the excitement of that time. That was really an exciting time. Everything was new. It seemed like infinite possibilities. God was working in amazing ways. There was just that level of excitement that I think the kind of excitement that the first Christians experienced in Acts. Here in Acts 2, on the day of Pentecost, and shortly after that, we have this description of Peter preaching at Pentecost, and then following that, the number of people who were coming, being saved, and those signs and wonders that were being done. Everyone was in awe, it says. And every meal was a celebration, exuberant and joyful as they praised God. Every day their number grew as God added those who were being saved. We felt some of that. We felt some of that then. Maybe not quite as much now. I don't know. But that was a special time. Actually, I was reminded of the lyrics from a country song. Trisha Yearwood happened to hear that last week, and I recall there's some lyrics in that song that just seem to really tell it in a meaningful way. And I'm going to read. I'm not going to sing, fortunately for you, but I'm going to read a few of those lyrics from her song. And this is about some couple that were young and very much in love and apparently driving cross country. We were rolling through the Rockies. We were up above the clouds when a station out of Jackson played that song. And it seemed to fit the moment, and the moment seemed to freeze when we turned the music up and sang along. And there was a God in heaven, and the world made perfect sense. We were young and were in love, and we were easy to convince. We were headed straight for Eden. It was just around the bend. And though I have forgotten all about it, the song remembered when. I love those lyrics. I think they're great. But From that, I'm moving on to this parable from Jesus, this parable of the talents that Jack read for you. And it feels kind of like that time when the Master, God, 10 years ago, entrusted a lot of resources, a lot of treasure to us, and said to us, take these, invest these, use these, multiply these, be responsible in my absence. And one day I will return and expect an accounting for your faithfulness. You know, that's really a pretty scary parable if you think about it. If you take it seriously, that's rather frightening to have that responsibility put upon us as God's servants. So when the Master returns, will he be pleased with the way that we have used and invested the resources that he gave us 10 years ago and has continued to give us? And I guess I confess that I have some mixed feelings about that. On the one hand, this has been an amazing journey. It's an amazing church. I hate that word amazing. It's the most overused word in American language today, I think. But I think it is in this case. It's probably appropriate. And at the same time, however, I feel some pain and some guilt, frankly, that maybe I, and perhaps we, haven't been quite as faithful as I, and perhaps we, could or should have been. We had such big plans, such high hopes when we broke ground there 10 years ago. And then when we began worship in our new building that fall, on that first Sunday of Advent, we opened for worship and just waited for the crowds to roll in. You know, okay, wonder how many people are coming this Sunday. And some did. Some did. Apparently out of curiosity. A lot of those had other churches they attended. They just wanted to see the new thing. And some actually came and stayed. How many of you came during that first few months or year we opened up? Anybody? Well, not too many stayed, I guess. But the point is, we didn't get that big bump in attendance that, the architects said, oh, you'll have 20% more the first Sunday and that'll grow, and that didn't happen. What we learned is that if you build it, they won't necessarily come. You know that if you build it, they will come. Field of Dreams movie, well, that doesn't happen exactly anymore with church. And we waited, and we did experience some growth, but not like we had hoped. And so we tried some outreach stuff. We did things to get out in the community to make people more aware of us. We, as Jesus told his disciples, we went out 2 by 2 into neighborhoods and knocked on doors. Most of that went reasonably well. There was one occasion where Joyce Erbaugh and I were visiting a little later in the evening, and we knocked on this door, and we could see through the window this elderly gentleman coming with a pistol in his hand, and we took off. There are several things I learned from that experience. One of those, probably the first thing I learned, is a lot of people have dogs. Because if you ring a doorbell, the chances are about 60% that a bunch of dogs are going to start barking. That's one reason we started the pet parade, because, hey, everybody's got dogs anyway. They want to show up and bring them. Outreach event. Another thing I learned at least 10 years ago, I don't think they're so prominent now, but these front yard fountains, these little fountains you could buy that the water circulates through. A lot of people had those. Most of them had not maintained them well, and they had green moss all over them. Saw a lot of those. And the third thing I learned is that very few people started attending our church as a result of our visits. Did anybody start attending church here as a result of our visits? I guess that didn't work either. And we did other things. We did random acts of kindness in the community. We did the McGaggiesville Parade, where we gave out Mountain Dew from Mountain View until we thought the kids were getting too wired, so we went from Mountain Dew to giving out water, living water. And we still do that. And other things, car shows, community picnics, tent event, Easter egg events. Some of those we're still doing. And some people probably came as a result of that. How many came as a result? I know we had one family that came. There's another one. All right, we got two there. As a result of some of these community things that we have done. So growth has happened, but it's been slow. And in fact, I hate to say this, but over the past couple of years, we have had more people going out than coming in. For the first time, our attendance has declined a bit. Not a lot, but a bit. And I wonder why. And I think a lot of us wonder why. We talk about some in meetings, leadership team or deacons meetings, or just informally, and we sit around and we say, you know, we think we have a great church, we just don't understand why people don't come and people don't stay. A few years ago, one summer, one of the guys from the Carpenters for Christ, this is a group of Baptists from Alabama who came and helped us build this church. 75, 80 guys came up. That's a whole story in itself that I don't have time to go into, but that was one of those miracles. But one of those people and his family were on vacation. They're traveling through it. He called me and wanted to see the church, and they came in. I showed him around. It was on a weekday. Nobody else was here. And he looked around and he asked us about our membership and our attendance. And I told him. I didn't think it was bad. But then he launched into a long story about his brother-in-law, who was a pastor down in Alabama or somewhere, and about this church that he had planted and the phenomenal growth that they have had, and how he would be glad to get me in touch with his brother-in-law so he could tell me about the techniques they've used and so forth. And I took the number, but I never did make that call. But I was depressed for a couple weeks after that because there was that sense that, you know, these guys came up and they helped us so much, and maybe they had higher expectations for where we would be at this point. And I think that's kind of how a lot of pastors feel, especially after reading success stories, books about church growth that are usually written by pastors of mega churches that have had all this phenomenal growth and that most of us don't experience. And then there's the McGaggiesville Ruritan Club. And Don Hess is not here today. We need to pray for Don. He's not feeling so well. But the Ruritans actually are a good community service organization. They really are. They do a lot of good stuff in the community. And I'm a member. The reason I joined was we were meeting in their building in the town hall, and I felt like I kind of needed to join to keep a good relationship with the Ruritans. Well, 16 years later, I'm still a Ruritan. But frankly, a couple of years ago, I thought that organization was going to die. It was just a few old people. I was probably about the youngest member in the club. And I thought they were going down the drain, frankly. And then something happened, and Don Hess had a big part in that. They got serious about recruiting new members. And I know they have at least 5 members, 5 from here, at least, including Becky. And most of those were recruited by Don Hess. And that club is stronger and younger and more diverse now than it ever was. And they're doing quite well. So I'm sitting at the Ruritan meeting last Tuesday night thinking, if these guys can resurrect that old and dying Ruritan club, why can't we experience growth in a fairly young and new and healthy church? They offer funnel cakes, we offer Jesus. I don't get it. Why are they so successful? And I know what a lot of you are thinking, and I agree that it's not primarily about numerical growth. It's about spiritual life and vitality. It's about faithfulness to God and His calling to us, and discipleship. It's about following Jesus. It's about hearing good news and sharing good news. But, and I would say that the numbers are not that important for their own sake. They are not that important as a measure of what the world calls success, because we don't measure things the way the world does. And yet, numbers are important because numbers represent people, and people matter to God. And people should matter to us. Do you hear that? Numbers matter because they represent people, and people matter to God, and they should matter to us. There are just a lot of people out there in this community and in every community who are essentially lost. Spiritually lost. They're confused. They're without direction. They're without hope. They're discouraged. They're lonely. They need something. They need Jesus. And they also need a community of people who love them and care about them. And how do we get the word to them? It would seem that a church that has the vision statement to be an authentic Christian community built on receiving and sharing the love of Jesus would have a lot of love to share. And I think we do. I think that's very clear, that we can offer love, we can offer hope, we can offer good news. But in order for us to do that, somehow we have to make that connection. We have to make that connection with them. And maybe we haven't done such a great job of that. A lot of that, I know, is about establishing relationships with people. It's not, it doesn't seem to be events or advertising, or those things don't just attract people anymore. They won't come just because we built a church building. And most of us, frankly, don't like the E word anyway, evangelism. You know, it's kind of scary to us. And so we try to avoid it. In fact, I think our church is less focused on reaching out and on evangelism now than it used to be. In fact, there was a response that got support at the retreat that we did last year. The response that somebody wrote was, "Fill people, not the church." That bothered me. I mean, I sort of understand that. I understand that filling people, their spiritual needs, is very important. But at the same time, I think those two go hand in hand. Yeah. As we fill people, we should fill the church. And I don't think you separate those out. As people and organizations age, however, they do become more settled, more inwardly focused, and there's that natural progression as we get older, you know. We just kind of become more inwardly focused. And that's understandable. But, hey, this church is not old. We're like 15, 16 years old. We should have plenty of energy and vision. We should be looking toward the future, not buckling down. And this is probably not a good time for this message, because right now, frankly, our church needs to be inwardly focused in a lot of ways, because we have had a number of deaths and a lot of illness recently. And so we need to be about caring for people and nurturing and giving compassion and care. And that keeps us kind of busy. And that's a good thing. That's a big part of what we need to be doing. And yet, I can't get that parable of Jesus out of my head. The Master's entrusted us with so much. It's a beautiful building with a beautiful view and a beautiful location. That's what everybody says. When they come in the door for the first time, you show them this church, they're all excited. Wow, what a beautiful place and beautiful church. Yeah, it is. I agree. We all agree. But it's more than that. It's also a lot of beautiful, gifted, hardworking, committed members who are striving to be faithful. I think we are. I think we are that. God has blessed us with so much and called us to be responsible stewards of this church, named Mountain View Fellowship. Named that before we even knew where we would be located. But God knew. And so that question still tugs at me. Am I being faithful? Are we being faithful? Are we investing and multiplying and using those talents that God has entrusted to us? And when the Master returns, will he say to me, to you, well done, thou good and faithful servant?